How you doing, Mrs. Walters? It's good to see you.
It's nice to see you too. Since our last meeting, of course, it's nice to see you.
So, what are we in here for today? Alton, correct?
Yeah. So basically, I've been having some concerns about Alton because it seems like he's been having some like behavioral issues and he doesn't seem to be, I don't know the right word, but developing as much as I see other children his age are. Like he won't walk or move or do any of those things at the same time that I see other children his age doing. And I'm just a little bit concerned about his future and like if there's anything that needs to be discussed there.
Yeah, so based off our last conversation and all the symptoms that you've been telling me, Alton seems like, if he does not have it already, but a high candidate for a Fragile X syndrome.
Mhm.
For a little bit more background information, so Fragile X syndrome is an X-linked genetic condition that that creates developmental issues for intellectuals and for behavioral issues. It changes and mutates the FMR1 gene, which is the protein needed for normal brain development. So that is why you see some behavioral and intellectual disabilities.
So, how did Alton even end up with Fragile X?
That's a great question. So I still need to confirm it with some screenings for you and your husband to confirm it by science and, just to confirm. But the most likely chance is that you actually are a carrier of Fragile X if you already do not have it. You may have it as a possibility, but it cannot be transmuted from male to male or female to female because of the X link. But so therefore, females have two X chromosomes, which means if one X chromosome mutates, it's going to be an easier chance for women to handle these mutations and whatnot. But like I said, you're probably a carrier. Now, two of you are carriers, but which we need to confirm from testing. That means Alton is most likely going to have it. So that is why. Any other questions on that?
So if Alton does really have Fragile X, um, is it like life threatening? Is there any other worries other than like behavioral and intellectual issues?
No, there's actually no life-threatening concerns for that. It doesn't affect his lifespan or anything like that. It's only his cognitive and his physical appearances, which are very lucky for that, but it does not affect life as we know it.
Okay. And another question.
Perfect. Keep it
Does
coming.
the condition get worse over time?
No, so actually, it does not. The only change you will see is more symptoms and things may come up and appear more often. So you might see some stronger, physical appearances alter, or some of his intellectual ability disabilities come in stronger, but it will not get worse over time.
Okay. And I know that you said that it was genetic, but is there something that I did wrong, like during my pregnancy, or was there any way that I could have prevented this?
Yeah, so a lot of parents think they actually do, but it's just nature taking its course. There's no absolute thing you could do to prevent it or whatnot. But you did the right measures of coming to talk to a genetic counselor like me and seeing how you could help your child in the future.
Okay. So, what does this mean for Alton's future? Like, what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
Perfect. That's what I was going to go into next. So Alden is going to have a tougher life than most normal kids, but he can live his life. Like we said, his lifespan is going to be normal. But like I said, his intellectual disabilities and his behavioral issues may cause some issues. So my recommendations for that is one, whoever his coaches, parents, teachers, and other surrounding resources, we need to inform them of his disability and tell them how we can handle them, whether it's like, individual classes, more help, even special education classes like that. Those are some things that we could take for him. And then even connecting with other parents who have Fragile X syndrome with their child and seeing what worked for them and what didn't. That's also another great thing to do. And then for behavioral issues, my suggestion would be if it really gets out of hand, there are some medications to take for that, which you could see your primary care doctor for.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of other negative effects of it that Fragile X syndrome can create, like a worsened heart or other diseases and whatnot. But for that, I'm out of my league on that, so I would have you go talk to your primary care doctor for that.
Okay.
It's going to be more unlikely, but still some things can arise from that.
Okay. And one last thing. So you explained that it was genetic, right? And there's a good chance that I'm a carrier.
Mm-hmm.
So the rest of my family, I have sisters, and one of my sisters is pregnant right now.
Mm.
And I'm just wondering if there's any chance that it could be like in my family, or if, my niece or nephew could also have Fragile X syndrome.
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to share this pedigree with you to show you kind of. Can you see that? Just make
Yeah, I
sure.
can.
Okay, so I don't know why it's crossed out your name, but that's you, and that's Mr. Walter, and that's Alton. Now, because of you two are carriers, most likely, which we need to confirm, but I'm very strongly, Alton is going to have it. Now, for you, as you're related, these are your three sisters. They are most likely carriers if you are a carrier as well.
Okay.
So then, if your sister is a carrier and her husband potentially, then and how may I ask how many weeks pregnant is your sister?
10 weeks,
10
I
weeks.
believe.
Okay. So that is still too young to determine if your pregnant sister's child is going to have it. What we need to do is one, we need to get all your sisters screened immediately, as well as
Hmm.
yourself, to determine if you are carriers or if you actually have Fragile X. And then what we need to second do is use a test for your sister's 10-week-old. It is called the chronic villus test. So this test is recommended for 10-week period of pregnancy. Detects whether or not you have a genetic disorder like Fragile X syndrome, and your screenings will come back positive or negative like that. But we have to determine the gender as well, because if it's a male and they have it, then it has to be your sister is a carrier for that. And if it's a female and it comes back positive, then um, uh, her husband has to have had it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay,
I'll make sure to tell her that.
perfect. But like I said, the main thing is we have to get you and your sisters all screened to determine who has it, who's inherited, and who's carriers.
So you just talked about right now that there's like prenatal testing, I think, stuff that you can do before.
Mhm.
Um, and we're gonna go get checked to see if we're carriers, of course. But is there any way that like we can do screening on Alton specifically to see if he has Fragile X?
Yeah, so there are some DNA genetic tests that you could individually go in and see the genetic and see if that the X chromosome is mutated or not. There are some tests. Let me bring up the name of it. Uh, So there are some tests like the Southern blot analysis test. It sees a full genetic mutation or not, and then there is a PCR test that sees if the guanine, the CGG pattern of Fragile X is in the DNA. Those tests run about from $300 to $600, but those are some of the two that you could see as Alton is right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what I always like to do for my patients after is if I'm not available to you right then and there and there's like an emergency, I will recommend these two. Let me get it. These two sites. Oh, sorry, wrong one. These two. So this is the National Fragile X Syndrome. They have a hotline as well, and um, they have a lot of good information on what to do and what and when and where kind of deal. And then the next one is the Mayo Clinic Laboratories. They have a great system for any questions or anything comes up with Fragile X syndrome. Any
Okay.
questions?
Um, no, I think we covered it all. Should I recommend that like my sisters individually go see a genetic counselor?
Yes, I would go see you, either come see me or their if they have their own, but they do need to see someone if they, especially your sister who's pregnant, to have the best chances of, seeing how to handle it in the future or whatnot. So that's my recommendations.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for coming to me, and I'll talk to you soon, Mrs. Walters.
Okay.